Hello! Welcome to week 3's video lecture. Since you're revising your rhetorical analyses, today I'm going to talk about why writers revise and what that can look like, or like what it entails. And then I'm going to go through an example of revision from my own writing to illustrate why revision is useful and what it actually looks like. Let's jump in!
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine, and you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
So first of all, we want to think about writing as a process, right? That's why we do the workshops, the rough draft, and the peer review, and then the final draft for each paper in this course. This is because thinking is a process, right? Our ideas change over time as we find out new information, reinterpret old information, and develop a more complex understanding of something. Also, nobody is going to get something perfect on the first try. Realistically, you'll never end up with something perfect, but to get strong results takes time and revision. Treating writing as a process accounts for these things and provides you with concrete opportunities for developing your ideas and how effectively you express them. Why do writers revise? Ideas change over time. You want to express your ideas as effectively as you can, too. So having someone peer review your paper and tell you what's unclear or isn't working gives you an outside perspective on your argument. Revision then takes this perspective into account to more adequately express the ideas. Perhaps your final product was good enough for what was required in the moment, but you want to do something more with the paper, and there's just the fact that something can always be improved. So what does substantial revision look like? It can mean reorganization, additional research, clarifying concepts or ideas that were unclear, incorporating feedback, revisiting or extending the analysis of evidence, reinterpreting evidence, filling in gaps or correcting flaws in your argument, changing the language, diction, or style, removing or replacing elements that don't work or fit in your paper, and sometimes you'll add new evidence or new good reasons that may not have occurred to you the first time. So I'm going to walk through an example of substantial revision of my own work. You probably don't know this, but I'm a graduate student. So my job is as a graduate instructor, but I actually also take classes myself. The classes I take are called seminars, which meet once a week for 3 hours, and we read something and we analyze it together in a discussion. And then in these courses, a seminar paper develops across the course of the semester. So you choose a text from the course that you want to write about. You read what a bunch of other people have said about it, and then you come up with something that you want to say about it that relates to what other people have said, but also adds something new to the conversation. And then you write a 15 to 20 page paper. This paper is from a graduate seminar I was in last fall, in which the professor utilized process work to help us produce the best final product possible. So first we did a proposal, then there was a first full dress version, so not a rough draft, it was a full paper, and then a final full dress version. I'm going to upload all of these to Canvas with my professor's feedback on them. They're long. I'm not expecting you to actually read them, but this is for you to see the feedback if you want to, and how I responded to it in my subsequent revisions. So the first part in the process was the proposal. As further evidence of the fact that writing is a process, my idea for the paper took a significantly new direction 2 days before the proposal was due. So my writing was kind of rushed and my ideas weren't fully formed yet, but they were more interesting and complex ideas than what I had originally been planning to do. If I just rigidly stuck to my original approach rather than understanding that writing is a process, the writing that I ultimately produced would not have been as interesting or as sophisticated. So the feedback I got on the proposal in summary was that it seemed like I wrote it in a rush, because I did. My prose needed to be more sophisticated, which was a symptom of me having written it in a rush. I needed to expand the scope of my research, look at what other people had said about the topic, and expand the breadth of my historical research. And my use of endnotes needed to be improved, and my argument had promise, but it needed more development. So how did I incorporate that into my first draft? I started writing much earlier, and I worked on it little by little. I paid careful attention to my prose style. It was also a lot easier to express my ideas in a more sophisticated way because they were more developed and informed by research at that point. And I had also read a lot of papers by other literary scholars and historians, and reading other people's writing can positively impact your writing style without you even noticing. Between the proposal and the first draft, I did a fuck ton of research. I did primary source research in a newspaper database, and then secondary source research into historical context, and then what other literary scholars had said about the book I was writing about. I read the book 2, maybe even 3 more times as I researched, so I could make connections between my research and my topic. And I looked at the endnotes in all of the scholarship I was reading and emulated those, and my notes were way better. Okay, so if you read the feedback on the first draft, you'll see that she notes that I had mostly fixed the problems that she pointed out in the proposal. I had improved those elements, which meant I could move on to other improvements. She points out 2 main problems to account for in my revision. The first was the organization of my paper and how that was affecting the impact of my argument. I had organized my paper in a way that went back and forth between historical context and my analysis of the novel, and she suggested that instead I should have a section that provided historical context and then a section for my analysis. I also needed to find secondary sources to back up the claims I was making with primary sources, basically meaning I don't have the ethos necessary to make the claims I was making, even if they were substantiated by the primary sources, and I needed to cite other historians to back up my claims, so for that like ethos by association. Because I was citing the primary sources, but someone would have to go and dig through a bunch of newspapers to substantiate my claim, rather than me just saying, oh, this historian has also talked about this, and it's backed up by the primary sources, so that it's more like automatically or immediately credible. And there were also quite a few moments where I didn't adequately explain my ideas. This is actually a continuous thing that I run into my writing, or that I run into in my writing, and you'll find that you probably have things where you make the same mistake over and over again, and then you just want to like focus on that thing, try to fix it. I presented the ideas without going into enough depth, and I used terms without defining them. My argument was sound, but my thesis statement didn't match the way I developed the argument in the body of the paper. My thesis statement made it seem like I was going to focus most of my attention on the novel's 2 lead male characters, but I talked about the lead female character a lot in the body of the paper. To incorporate that feedback into the final draft, I took the professor's advice and changed the organization to have a section on historical context and a section on the novel. I did another fuck ton of research. This time it was mostly historical research. I read the book again to account for the new information I had from my research in my analysis of the novel. I was conscious of making connections in my writing and taking the time to slow down and explain my ideas, and I changed the thesis statement to match the body of my paper. So the feedback on the final draft, not to brag, but kind of to brag, she said my historical context section was, quote, masterfully written. But I needed to be less deferent to other scholars in my introduction and just come out with my thesis statement all at once. I spent too much time setting it up, and it detracted from the impact of my argument. My topic sentences in the second section needed to be stronger. They detracted from my argument. And my argument wasn't consistently carried through the paper. I was providing evidence in support of the argument, but I needed to improve on explicitly connecting that evidence back to the argument. She suggested that I could develop the paper further with more historical research, And she also suggested that I develop it into an article-length paper, which is a different genre of writing than a seminar paper, which means more revision and more work. So how am I incorporating that feedback moving forward? I am still doing research. It's slow going because I have other classes now and teaching. I'll rewrite the introduction. I'll work on the topic sentences and transitions and be conscious of carrying my argument through the paper. After I do the next revision, I'll bring the paper back to the professor. She'll read it and provide notes and feedback, and then I'll revise it again, and then probably again. So hopefully this has been useful for how you think about revision in your writing. Remember that you want to think about writing as a process, just like thinking and developing ideas is a process, and that the more you respect the fact that writing is a process, the better the outcome will be.